So here we are once again talking about topics as we do. The topic of today's stream is going to be data. It's going to be a chill data stream. I'm looking at the different aspect ratios, and let's turn that exposure down just a smidge, just a tad. High exposure stream, yeah. Let's just turn that down a tad. It looks a little bit grainy. I got the softness on. No one wants to see, oh, the sharpness somehow kicked up there on me. So how's that? How are we doing? How are we looking? We got Ziv Fuchs. Ziv Fuchs is over here. And I'm gonna guess the audio is working. We'll just start talking about data and pull up a nice like Wikipedia. I'm not gonna read the Wikipedia. I just like to stare at Wikipedia. I just like the different languages. You've got like the puzzle piece globe thing going on. You've got the different letters and whatnot. So it's just a very calming, relaxing image. So we're talking about data today. We're talking about some data that I think I've internalized enough. I don't have to go and refer you to the exact sources of the data. But I think the first data point is that 27%, which if we want to round it off, give you a nice round number, something like, I guess, between 1 in 4 and 1 in 3 Republicans over the age of 65, when asked the question, do you think gay marriage is good? They say yes. It's not, do you think it's tolerable? Do you think it's acceptable? Do you care? Do you not care? Are you neutral about it? Do you not like it, but you sort of begrudgingly at the Thanksgiving dinner table, you say, whatever. None of those questions were asked. The question that's asked is, do you think gay marriage is a good thing for society? 27% of Republicans over the age of 65 say yes. Now, of course, if you look at Republicans under the age of 65, I think the crowd, the younger demographic they selected was like 18 to 25. Now, that demographic of Republicans, I think the statistic was 57% say it is a good thing that we have gay marriage. It's a good thing for society. So a couple things to note here right off the bat. The Generation Z meme that basically looked at the way in which young boys make dead baby jokes. We all know this if you've been a young boy, unless you grew up in a very wholesome environment. You've probably come across dead baby jokes. You've probably engaged in some dead baby jokes. Not that that is a good thing. It's just what young boys do. They're pushing boundaries. It's that Faustian spirit of youth, right? They're pushing buttons, pushing boundaries. They're trying to see if there is something so off limits that it stops being funny. And for young boys, the question the answer to that question is sort of no, that it can be dead babies. It can be any manner of things. And so because we live in a society where it's no longer Jesus Christ who is king, it's no longer the church, it's no longer the mass and the sacraments that are holy and fetishized. And I use that term in sort of an objective sense, not to say it's a bad thing. Maybe the more objective word is sacralize. And the negative is fetishized. But either way, they're describing the same psychological process by which we attach or anchor ourselves to certain phenomena or abstract ideas. Those Christian elements are not so important in society anymore. And again, if you look at Republicans specifically, with regard to religion, younger Republicans think religion is less important than older Republicans. So we'll get to that later, but just sticking to this one point, this one data point for the moment. So we're talking about Generation Z. We're looking at the fact that, if you jump into a Call of Duty chat, these anonymous voice chats that people have with Call of Duty, or you just hop on 4chan where young people congregate in an anonymous platform, or you look at the kind of memes that, teenage or prepubescent or whatever these young boys are sharing, they are pushing boundaries intentionally. They are pushing boundaries, one, for hormonal reasons, for biological reasons, but two, because of certain media narratives they sort of glom onto and take up. There's the myth, I should say, of Zeus who overthrows his father. Odin overthrows his father. So there is a deep and, in fact, tradition, I don't know what else to call it, but a traditional mythos throughout Western Eurasia, whatever we want to call this geographical space, this cultural space, there is this myth of the son overthrowing the father, the son overthrowing the old order. And that has been compounded upon by a lot of media, by a lot of Hollywood, by a lot of commercials, advertisings, little things, little implicit things, subtle things in the media that take this thing, which maybe is ancient in orientation, which is maybe biological in some sense, they take it and then they push it and they compound on it and they turn it in a certain direction. Well, when young kids are told it's cool to be a rebel, it's cool to break the rules, and then you tell them the rule is, you can't violate political correctness, you can't say offensive things, and those offensive things just happen to be right-wing things, then the appearance becomes, to the outsider just looking at one of these offensive memes, oh, young people are right-wing. That is the appearance to people. But that is making a critical error. And that is assuming, for example, that for instance, if I make dead baby jokes when I'm 13, 14, 15, that I'm going to be making them the rest of my life. No, there's a process of maturation where we go through this rejection of the mainstream. We reject the culture around us. We reject the sacraments, the sacred objects, abstract or physical. We reject these things. And then at some point, we mature, we settle down. It may not involve having a wife and kids, but at some point, we sort of codify, our neuroplasticity decreases, our willingness and our desire to be offensive purely for the sake of being offensive without any further grounds, it dies down and we get older and we move into our 30s and our 40s and our 50s and our 60s and our 70s and our 80s. And all of those decades of life are important voting populations. So if we were to even take the most offensive cultures and memes, is our kids going to be voting, even if let's say we drop the voting age to 13, then, we would get the most offensive, candidates, the most offensive political positions. But if you actually look at young people, they are not trending toward the right in the long run. When you create a society that has a taboo around being too right-wing, you're of course going to have instances where people make offensive jokes because they like being offensive. It's not that they just have some theology that is right-wing or that they have some kind of ideology that's right-wing. They don't have a rational justification. They don't have something that's going to stay with them through their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s into their old age, that's going to transmute and transmit and transfer into political action or into a stable culture or into a religious orientation or any of that. People being offensive simply for the sake of being offensive, that's not sustainable. Now you can point at it, and there is a dynamic between the left and the right where the left benefits from holding up right-wing instances of being uncouth or sacrilegious in the same way that you think about the Puritans in England and America burning witches, because there were some weird women. There were some women who maybe some of them were engaged in witchcraft. Maybe some of them were ugly. Maybe some of them, I don't know what they were doing. Maybe they were getting freaky with it. I don't know what they were doing, but they took those women who kind of no one liked them to begin with. They never picked like the wife of the leader of the community. They never picked anyone important. They took women who were sort of on the fringes of society and they held them up and they said, this is a witch, we have to burn her. And by doing that, by having this constant scapegoat, oh, don't do that or you'll become a witch. By having that at the fringes, it's sort of the way policing works. If everyone broke the law all at the same time, there'd be no way for the police to stop that, because for every 100 people, there's only one police officer. Sometimes it's less. Sometimes for every 1,000 individuals, there's one police officer, or even worse than that, 10,000. Whatever order of magnitude it is, there are not enough police to stop everyone from committing crimes if we all do it on the same day or all at once. That's the problem with a riot. If you have a big riot, police can't stop it. That's why they have riot tanks, riot police, the big water guns, tear gas. They start to use technological applications for that kind of process, because just having, at the bare minimum, you need guys with big plastic shields and body armor and things of that nature, or what do they call it, rubber bullets. So you sort of need to up your game. And if, riot is one thing, it's centralized in a geographical location. If you do it in a dispersed way, if everyone does crimes like all over the place. You can't stop those all at once. So the way that you address policing is at the margins, right? You take an example, you say, we're going to make an example out of you. And then that strikes fear into people and they say, well, I don't want to be like that guy. So the left, in order to police culture, needs and amplifies right-wing voices. So the left is constantly searching for and looking for desperately any hint of right-wing resistance. It's their full-time job, to find any kind of glimmer of hope for the right wing, right? They want to find the Covington kids, or they want to find an offensive joke or an offensive meme, or people doing the OK sign, or whatever it is. They want to find these little things and they want to explode them. Because to do so is the way that they police culture. If they don't have an example of what the devil looks like, or what the witch looks like, or what the Nazi looks like, if they don't have that example, then they can't effectively police culture. They need to keep that alive. They need to keep the flame alive. If at any point they can say, oh, well, the right wing doesn't exist, we defeated them, let's celebrate, you get what you saw in the 1990s after the collapse of the Soviet Union, because the right wing for so long had held up the Soviet Union as the scapegoat, as the boogeyman, as we have to fight communism. Well, communism collapsed. And so as a result, the right wing kind of collapsed in a lot of ways. And that was a period of malaise and destruction, sort of for the right wing in a lot of ways, where the right wing lost its orientation. It no longer really knew what it was about, and it had to reformulate itself, and it's continuing to do that. And it did so very weakly, and it did so very ineffectively. And we got the Bush family, we got the Clintons, and that's sort of what came out of that. So you would think that if the right wing wins the victory, if they defeat the Soviet Union, that everyone should be celebrating, and that should be good, and that's going to bring them to their next victory. But that's not necessarily how it works. There's a fine line you have to tread in psychological and sociological systems of control between being a loser. No one wants to be on the losing team. So you have to portray yourself as the winners at all times. We're winning, even if we're the underdogs, we're winning. Look at us, we're gorillas, we're winning. Look, we did this with $1,000. Imagine if we had $1 million, we're winning. You have to somehow pervert the facts and the evidence, and you have to change the situation and lie to people and say, yeah, we're winning. That's the way that you mobilize people. Psychologically, you have to have good morale. If you say we're losing, everything's done for, it's all terrible, that's where people get disaffected, depressed, apathetic, and suicidal, and they don't really want to be involved with your little movement anymore. So you have to portray yourself as the winner at all times. But secondarily, you can't portray yourself as the absolute winner, or you can't say that you don't have an enemy. You need a common enemy. Common enemies are what unites people. People did love Trump, but they loved him because he attacked Hillary. What was the substance of Trump? Was he anti-gay? No, at no point was Trump ever anti-gay. I guess you could make an argument with Mike Pence, the vice president, and the electroshock therapy and all the controversy there that was drummed up by the left to say, oh, it's a boogeyman. But was he anti-gay? No. Was he, reflexively, we look back at it, was he anti-immigrant? Well, at all times, he always said, we're going to have a big door in the wall. And we're going to let people in. We're going to bring in the best and the brightest to destroy the middle class even further. We're going to stop hurting the poor, and we're going to start hurting the middle class by bringing in these programmers and highly skilled immigrants. And he said that from the beginning. He said that all along. And it was a controversy when he talked about the H-1B. He said, oh, we need more H-1B. And that was controversial, and he had to backtrack on that because that's his true opinion. But he had to say, oh, I didn't really know. It was a totally Charlie Kirk move. People don't remember this during the campaign. That he said, oh, yeah, we need more H-1B. We need more green cards for highly skilled immigrants. And he had to kind of backpedal on that because the base was mad. And that's easy for him to do during the campaign. He said, oh, I misspoke. Well, now we see what his true intentions are. Now we see what's really going on. So, in what respect, whether it's gender relations, whether it's immigration, in what respect was he offering some positive vision? He was saying, keep out people we don't like. He was saying, let's bully people we don't like. Let's insult people we don't like. let's, build a wall, which is a negative force, build a wall, which is not going to do anything, by the way, unless you have like a Romney plan, E-Verify, where you're denying people benefits if they don't have citizenship. That's the only important thing. You don't need a wall. Just stop giving them free stuff and they'll leave. There's no reason to be here if there's no economic incentive. So you shut off the economic incentive and they'll just self-deport. The wall is total stupid. It's a totally negative. We're going to build a big wall, this big threatening, powerful wall, which is emptiness. It's vacuous. So vacuous on the immigration question, vacuous on gender relations, vacuous on pretty much everything. What did he offer? It was nothing positive. It was all negative. Even to make America great again, well, let's just go back. There was no forward vision. There was no positive. I think the most positive, really, if you think about Trump, he wanted to build the military to kill people, because of course someone's going to invade us, right? The Department of Defense needs more money. So we're going to build up the military to further, destroy countries around the world. And then I think out of everything, it was probably the infrastructure bill. Oh, we need like $4 trillion in infrastructure. He was just throwing out some crazy number. Yeah, we need to spend an absurd amount on infrastructure. And I think that was the most positive thing. He was like, oh, I've built so many buildings. We're going to spend more money on infrastructure than we've ever done before. Of course, I mean, what has been spent on? I've heard nothing. I've heard not a peep. I mean, maybe you could say the fence that he's built on the southern border, which is not even something he's built. It's just sort of he's torn down existing fencing and replaced it with new fencing. And there's still plenty of open gaps and people can still take airplanes and come into the country. It's totally ineffective. It's totally worthless. I mean, the reason why, for instance, Israel has an effective immigration policy is because before you even board a plane to Israel, or if you arrive at the airport, they vet you. And if they don't like you for whatever reason, they Google your name. Oh, you made a bad comment on YouTube 5 years ago. Oh, we don't need you. We don't need you in the country. They're allowed to do that. It's their sovereign power to do so. They can refuse people entry to the country. And you can't just drive across the border. And if you fly into the country, they vet you. And if you somehow sneak into the country, they do have ways of checking, are you a citizen? Are you supposed to be here? And there is no such thing as a sanctuary city in Israel. If the local government finds out you're not supposed to be here, they tell the federal government. The federal government takes care of you immediately. They don't play around. So it's that they have laws in the book and they enforce them. There are certain laws in the United States that, say it's illegal to come into the country without going through the proper channels. Those are not enforced on a local level. They're not enforced on a state level. They're not even enforced on a federal level. And the tactics that we use, which is this catch and release, you catch people, then you release them across the border, and then they just come back again. I mean, Israel detains people, and essentially they've got this entire territory. I mean, imagine if we invaded Mexico and we made Mexico into the Gaza Strip, or we made Mexico into the West Bank, where we said, we control Mexico now. We control Mexico, and we're not going to allow any tanks into Mexico, no planes, no bombs. Total blockaded the Mexican economy, basically hold Mexico hostage, take all the people in our country we don't like, deport them to Mexico. Every year, we're going to establish little towns within Mexico that are sovereign settler territories. We're basically going to bulldoze Mexican towns and then take a bunch of Americans, put them in that town, make it a police state, surround it with armed guards, and continually expand that, so that Mexico is sort of this reservoir of people we don't like. And then we can continually put settlers into Mexico to basically erase Mexico off the map. I mean, if something like that was being done, I would say that's pretty effective, right? That's pretty effective. Nothing like that ever will be done. So people like Trump as a negative figure. They like him. I still ask, well, why do people support Trump? Oh, well, he's better because he won't do this. He won't do that. He won't do this. He won't do that. There's no positive vision on the right. There's no positive vision of what's going to happen in the future. It's just, well, we can slow down this. We can prevent it from happening for a few more years. He's not going to do this. He's not going to do that. Well, I don't know. He certainly is doing a lot. He certainly is doing a lot. And, I kind of have to wonder, on this question of infiltration of like, well, we just have to wait things out until what? Until what exactly? What is going to happen? I think the best arguments that I've heard is basically I'm going to buy a plot of land and I'm going to hang out with my bros and we're just going to live. We're going to be basically Amish plus. We're going to have we're going to be self-sufficient. We're going to be we're going to have our local autarky. We're going to produce all our own food, all our own resources. We're going to have everything. We're not going to rely on the outside economy. We're going to do everything legal. And we're basically going to be the Amish. And the government's not going to touch us because I guess of popular opinion would not be happy with that. Although you look at Waco, and I don't think that's true. I don't think popular opinion stopped Waco from happening. And Timothy McVeigh was the response. He was the quote unquote popular response, which was not so popular. And in fact, the Oklahoma City bombing was basically just used to what was it? It wasn't Ellen Kagan. I'm thinking who was the Clinton? Who was the OKC bombing? Janet Yellen. See, I don't even have to look it up. I just have to start typing, and it accesses my neurons. So yeah, Janet Yellen basically took that as, oh, well, we can just do all this stuff now because, well, look at what these crazy right-wingers are doing. So it's just more justification to move the needle toward the left. Yeah, maybe an office building. People lost their lives, and that's very sad and tragic. But when we're talking about the purely political aspect, putting aside the generous empathy that we have for all victims of crimes and so on, but you just look at that in this process, I mean, I just don't think there is public sympathy. I think that the Amish are allowed to survive because they present no genuine threat to the system. And if they ever do muster up the courage to be threatening to the system, they will be done away with. And there will be no popular backlash. And if there is some kind of violent backlash, that will be used as justification by the government to crack down even further. And it's just going to be a cycle, right? As I've described. Scapegoats are necessary. The right needs the Soviet Union. The left needs Nazi fascists, KKK, white nationalists, whatever. So everyone needs a scapegoat, and the right wing provides that scapegoat. And then the right wing deludes itself because it needs to feel like it's winning. It deludes itself into thinking that when the left shows the Covington kids, they show, oh, it's Generation Z, they're so based. Well, the statistics say that Generation Z, Republicans, I'm not talking about all Americans. I'm not talking about an average. I'm not talking about, well, that's just because we've got immigrants coming in, or that's just because of the Democrats. Or no, we're just looking at Republicans. It's something like 57%, correct me if I'm wrong, 57% of young people 18 to 25 Republicans. And remember, Republicans are only something like 30% of the country. Most people are politically unaffiliated. Most people don't care about this stuff. You've got maybe 20 to 30% of people who identify as Republicans, 20 to 30% of people who identify as Democrats, sometimes more. Usually more people identify as Democrats than Republicans. And usually people who vote Republican, independents tend to, in some respects, lean Republican. All that, of course, that changes over time. But it's something like 40% of the country or more, 40 to 50% maybe is independent, not really aligned with either party. So you've got a small dedicated minority of people who are wearing the MAGA hat, who call themselves conservatives, who say, I'm a Republican, 90% support for Donald Trump, who is the most extreme candidate out of like a field of like 16 or 19 candidates or whatever it was. Sorry, I keep hitting the mic here, but whatever it was, 2016, huge field of candidates, so many different varieties of views. And you had Rubio, and you had Bush, and you had Cruz, and you had all these people. I can't even remember the rest of them. Chris Christie, actually very good on corruption in a lot of respects, although he had the whole bridge fiasco himself. So it's like he persecutes corruption maybe when it's in his favor and maybe not so much when he's doing the corruption. But anyway, you had an interesting field of candidates with really many different strengths, and they were all very qualified. I mean, every single one of them was really highly qualified to be president in their own certain special way. And Trump was the most extreme out of all of them, and he's what you get. He's what you get, and it's nothing, right? It's actually in negative. It's moving negatively in the direction. He's pushing young conservatives to be more pro-gay marriage than ever before. This trend's continuing. Again, the if we were to freeze everybody cryogenically and eliminate aging without even looking at the future for a moment, because we did that futurology video not too long ago, without making, we probably will make some predictions about the future or suggestions. But if we just froze things in time right now, 27% of self-identified Republicans over the age of 65 say that gay marriage is a good thing for society. I mean, I don't know if people can wrap their minds around this. At 1 in 4, between 1 in 4 and 1 in 3. So you're looking at the average person. How many people do you know are over the age of 65? Maybe you have uncles or grandparents or whatever. And it's like 1 in 4, 1 in 3 of these people thinks not just neutral about it, not just it's okay, not just we tolerate, but it's good for society. 27%. I mean, that's huge, right? That's huge, because it'd be one thing if it was like, oh, well, yes, of course, some old people are liberal. We all knew that. We didn't need Pew Research to tell us. Some old people are liberal. Some old people are communists, whatever. But that's a small minority of old people. Most old people, they're either independents or they're Republicans. Because, again, we know most people over the age of 65 come from a time and place in America which was a little bit different culturally in a number of ways. So, of course, some old people are going to be liberal. That's fine. That's whatever. That is what it is. We're just talking about Republicans. We're just talking about Republicans over 65. This is old guard Republicans, the most conservative Republicans that exist. 27%. I mean, isn't that an amazing statistic? That would be like if you went to young Democrats, like Democrats 18 to 25, and you asked them something like, I don't know, some crazy right-wing question. Like, do you support Donald Trump? If you ask like young Democrats 18 to 25, you said, do you support Donald Trump? And 27% of them were like, yeah, I mean, that is the base. That is the base of the Democratic Party. The hardcore Democrat supporters would be young people, 18 to 25, self-identified Democrats. Imagine if you could get them, like 27%, 1 out of 4 young Democrats saying, yeah, I support Donald Trump. Yeah, I support building the wall. Isn't that incredible? The supposed base of the Republican Party, the supposed hardcore, these old, we know who they are, they're very old people, and they're self-identified Republicans at 27%. It's a good thing for society to have gay marriage. I can't stress it enough. I mean, when you really conceptualize it, you really think about it, if you ask the self-identified Democrats those sorts of questions, which I mentioned before, you'd be down in the single digits if it would even be anything above negligible support. The support for Trump in the Democrat Party among young people, we're talking about in the single digits. If we can even get 1%, if we can even get 1%, we're talking about the single digits. We're not breaking 9% here. I mean, it's very low. I mean, these people are ideologically on point. They are on point. They've just gone through 12 years of public school or whatever it is. They are really on point. They know what's up, and they are ideologically lock, step, and barrel. They are in the zone, so to speak. Whereas the conservatives, the Republicans, they're like, oh yeah, gay marriage is a good thing, and let's just we'll let in immigrants if they're qualified. And the Republican Party doesn't know what's going on. So even if the Republicans just became the mono party, and the Democrats just totally imploded, and I don't know who would be the candidate, who would be the worst possible candidate, Tom Steyer, or I'm trying to think of someone who'd be really unpopular. I think Bloomberg might be more popular than people give him credit for, but I'm trying to think of who would be the least, maybe a Cory Booker or Julian Castro. Trying to think of who would be the most egregiously, maybe a Tulsi would be really unpopular, because again, 70% of Americans believe we should increase military spending in some capacity or another. 70%. This is a bipartisan support. 70% of Americans think we should be more involved overseas. And I'm using the lowball numbers. If you divide it by party, oftentimes Republicans, actually no, sometimes the Democrats are more pro. It depends on how you phrase the question. If you use liberal language or not, because it's just a semantics game, right? It's the sacred word. if you say more military spending, Republicans tend to be, it's 70-80 split. Democrats say, oh yeah, spend more on the military. Republicans really gung-ho on it. Whereas if you say, should we be more involved in world affairs? Should we have more humanitarian aid toward Venezuela? Then you get Democrats are actually more supportive of foreign intervention. So it's a bipartisan issue. Even if the Republican Party were the mono party and the Democrats just totally fell apart, we would still be going in the exact same direction that we're currently going in. And when we look at the younger demographics on every single question, the younger demographics, you ask them, is diversity a good thing for the country? It is always the case that the younger Republicans say yes. The older Republicans are, more hesitant, I suppose, in the polling. I think it's something like older Republicans, when you ask them, is diversity good? Older Republicans, sometimes they're like 30% of them are like, yeah, it's good. And then 40% of young Republicans are saying, oh, yeah, it's excellent. So you see the direction we're shifting in on every question of what does it mean to be Republican? What does it mean to be conservative? What does it mean to be right wing? We see it moving intergenerationally. We see it moving within the party. And then we see the two parties moving both in conjunction toward this direction. And the question of infiltration. So I was and I'll probably put this out, I was watching a little Hitchens interview on South Africa, and he was talking about the power of money and international finance and deciding the destiny of South Africa, though he didn't quite put it that way. The amount of influence the Western world had over South Africa and making certain predictions. It's just an interesting interview. And he's talking about all these things. And ultimately, when we think about some of the stuff that was going on in South Africa with the ANC and other rebellions in the third world and the Vietnam War and some of these things, guerrilla war only works when there is some kind of support for that guerrilla war. We now know from the Afghanistan papers, which I think it would be cooler to call it the Taliban papers or the Taliban tablets or something like that. We need a more catchy word than Afghanistan papers. But we now know that who is funding the Taliban? This is a big question mark. Who was funding the Taliban? Who is, or to put it more accurately and more broadly, who is funding the insurgency? Who is funding the people putting the IEDs in the roads to blow up American soldiers? Who is killing Americans? Who is funding those people? Well, we were, right? We were paying these local chieftains for protection services. We were paying them however many thousands of millions of dollars, I don't know. We're paying them all this money for protection, supposedly from the Taliban. These chieftains then say, well, every time, it's a supply demand thing. Every time the troops, the Americans get hit with these IEDs, they pay us more money. We're more in demand, so we can raise our rates. So then they start putting out the IEDs, and the American military knows what's going on. They have the intelligence. They're not totally stupid. We know with the records, they knew what was going on. They knew this was happening, and they were still paying these people. They were paying the Dane Geld, You pay the Dane, you say, oh, keep those Norwegians away. And then the Danes start invading you. You got to pay the Dane Geld. So that's what we were doing. We're paying the Dane Geld. We are funding the Taliban. We're funding the chieftains. We're funding the terrorist attacks and the insurgency. Because the point of that war was never to defeat the enemy. It was never to bring democracy. It wasn't even to steal the resources. We know China's coming in with their countries and taking the uranium and taking the tungsten and the rare metals. That wasn't the point. The point was to create an endless military conflict self-funded by us. We did this, by the way, Iran-Contra, where the Reagan administration, to fund conflict in South America, was selling weapons to Iran, supposedly the enemy of the United States. But the Iran-Contra was happening in the context of the Iran-Iraq war. We funded both sides. We supported Saddam and we supported the Iranians. We supported both of them because we wanted just conflict and chaos and warfare. It's the same thing we do against ourselves. And in Afghanistan, we fund our enemies and we fund our troops. We fund our enemies, we fund our troops. So it goes back and forth. There's a military-industrial complex aspect where arms dealers are making money, and so they like it. And then there's the fact that if we actually brought that war to a peaceful conclusion by negotiating with the Taliban, nuking the country or whatever. If we somehow ended the conflict, then we wouldn't have a justification to stay there. If we don't have a democratic justification to stay there, we can't keep our military bases. If we can't do that, well, it kind of defeats the purpose. We're not in striking proximity of Iran anymore. So it's a very interesting thing, right? So all of these things, they're all these different pieces: foreign policy, domestic policy, cultural policy. All of these things are moving along in a certain direction. It would be one thing if you just gave me a poll and you said 57% of young people say that gay marriage is good for society. That'd be one thing. I'd say, well, yeah, we've got immigrants, we've got all kinds of new people, we got new ideas, we got feminists, we got people who are not going to have families, people who are not going to reproduce. They have all kinds of ideas. That's fine. It's whatever. But when you have 57% of young Republicans, 18 to 25, saying gay marriage is good for society, what conclusion do you draw from that other than the Republican Party is just sort of lagging behind the Democrats? It's not something that's new is being said, but it's something that I think people are still refusing to confront in a genuine way, and that people think that, okay, well, yeah, that's true, but here's how Gen Z is based in some obscure, accidental, anecdotal way, and that prove, no, that you're not thinking about this in an empirical, scientific way. You're thinking about this, you have a conclusion in mind. We're winning because that has to be true, because if it's not, people aren't going to be interested. So for the sake of morale, we have to say we're winning. And then because you have to say we're winning, we have to pick on these little anecdotal incidences of, oh, well, we attacked a Trump surrogate. That's who Charlie Kirk is. We attacked a Trump surrogate, and therefore, I guess we're winning then, right? We humiliated one of millions of different Trump surrogates who have these $1 million endowments. And again, to bring it back to the idea of like a guerrilla insurgency, people who look and say, well, look at Vietnam, look at Afghanistan, look at all these things. They were all astroturfed. Every single insurgency, even the American Civil War, who funded that? Is effectively if we do a currency conversion, because of course inflation has taken, now we talk about billions and trillions of dollars. But 100 years ago, instead of being a millionaire, or instead of being a billionaire, you'd be a millionaire. It's the same level of dominance within an economic hierarchy. It's just a different number. It's a different order of magnitude due to inflation. So instead of talking about people with billions of dollars, we used to talk about people with millions of dollars. And then if you go before that, well, we didn't really have a United States greenback currency to talk about, but you had people who were really wealthy. I mean, these guys were all well connected. They were part of their skull and bones of the day, which was these Freemasons. George Washington was the first president. He was, although some people say he wasn't, and that's always been confusing to me. I guess there were some continental congresses that elected other presidents while he was a general, but after the war, he was the first president anyway. So they were well connected, they were wealthy, they were funding this thing out of their own pocket in a way. In the same way you look at the Crusades, yes, there was a children's crusade, but the Crusades ultimately were lords and aristocrats funding the crusade themselves. And to the extent that they really couldn't, tax the populace too much back then. But to the extent that something is taxed today, that's not like a democratic organization. That is the state having a certain hierarchy, using that centrality to tax the population to fund wars. So now Hillary Clinton doesn't have to spend her own money to fight a war. She can spend your money to fight the war. And people support that, again, in massive numbers. You'd think that these Iraq and Afghanistan travesties would make people think, oh, maybe we should stop spending so much on the military. Maybe this is a bad road to go down. Maybe we should, basically take the whole thing apart, no longer have a standing army, and just say, look, we have enough guns to defend ourselves from foreign threats, or at least to say, look, if we need some kind of defense of our country, or we need it in certain places, let's regulate it more or whatever. No, people just support more intervention. For the Democrats is how you say, oh, more humanitarianism, more foreign aid. And for the Republicans, you say more military spending. And it's, again, 70% plus, both parties. You just have to approach it in a different way semantically, and you can get them to support the same exact thing, ultimately, 70 to 80%, even higher in some cases. It's sort of mind-blowing But it just shows you to the extent to which people's opinions are merely a product of what the power structure wants them to believe. And you can't break out of this through some kind of guerrilla insurgency infiltrating the Republican Party is not going to work. So, I think the only respectable position is a realistic position. And some people conflate that with pessimism and say, well, you're being realistic, you're being pessimistic. Well, maybe your strategy is just wrong. Maybe you're just pursuing something that feels good in the moment, feels good right now to feel like you're on the winning team, but you're abusing and misusing and perverting and twisting facts and evidence, preferring anecdote over statistic, preferring to put the blinders on and only see Gen Z when they're being offensive and not to see, what they actually think, what they actually support, what they actually do in their personal lives, how they actually act. You're not seeing the forest for the trees, right? And that's a problem. It's a problem when people invest time and money in organizations and movements and things and emotional energy, and they're directing it towards something which is really the brainchild of people who have so thoroughly lost their own reputation that they can only apply their skills in a way that reinforces these false conceptions. And to break that down, what I'm actually saying here is you have a situation where people at some point made a mistake. They said something publicly that destroyed their possibility of being part of the mainstream. And so instead of going quietly into the night, instead of saying, I give up or moving to a different career path or whatever, they said, no, I'm going to stick to what I said. I'm going to stand behind it. I'm going to double down. And because that's the only way that they could survive. If you're a commentator, if you don't have any skills, if you can't weld and you can't farm and you can't do finance, you can't do math, you can't teach, maybe you just don't want to do those things. Sometimes it's not a question of ability. Sometimes it's just a question of will. There are people who I think do not want to be a wage cuck or a wage slave or perform blue collar labor or even white collar labor. They want to talk, as I'm doing now here on YouTube. They want to talk, they want to blab. And so because they've been pushed out of the mainstream, they've been forced into a situation where, well, I like talking about politics and culture and contentious issues, but I've been forced out of the mainstream, so I'll double down and target an audience in the same way that women on the internet will target men. They will target men. They will dress provocatively. Sometimes they don't even need to dress provocatively. Sometimes, I'm a streamer. I'm a girl and I'm streaming, or I'm talking about politics, or I'm talking about culture or whatever. There's a spectrum of it, obviously. There's a spectrum of the sort of trad version or the variant where, it's the idea of a girl rather than the bodily exposure. And then it goes all the way to just blatant, pornography, right? There's sort of a spectrum in there where there's implicitly always, when a girl is putting forth her voice and her face or an avatar or the idea of girlness on some deep psychological level, that's a signal to men, I'm going to give you something. I'm going to give you something. Now, this might not be conscious. I think there might be women who are just not conscious of this process. But on some subconscious level and some unconscious level, these signals are being sent and they're being received. And men might consciously understand, okay, I know this girl on the internet's never going to sleep with me. We're never going to reproduce. But on some kind of like deep instinctual level, I think evolutionary psychology has a good model where it says, no, these men on some deep level, they actually think, or some part of their brain, some kind of really instinctual, pre-rational part of their brain really does believe that, this is my chance, or I'm seeing a woman right now. When we look at the pixels on their screen, we don't conceptualize it as pixels on the screen. We conceptualize, I'm looking at a girl right now. So this is a tactic which girls knowingly or unknowingly use to get views, to get followers, to get money, to get donations, to get whatever, to get attention. Sometimes it's not economic, sometimes it's social, sometimes they just want attention. But in any case, they're somehow extracting a psychological resource from a population. And you have to ask yourself, is this right? Is this correct? Is this something that should be affirmed? Should we encourage simping, as it were? Simping for the e-girls? Should we encourage that? Well, we can see how that's problematic. We can see how, on some level, the reason why people simp is because they really, truly, some part of them believes that simping is going to gain them reproductive resources when it's not. And so we kind of have to interject there and say there's a huge dissonance going on where you want something on a deep level, but this path that you keep treading, this effort that you're putting forward here, is not going to achieve you that goal. In fact, it's going to hurt your achievement of that goal. It's going to make you unhappy. It's going to make you miserable. So instead of fueling, putting the tension on the e-girl, putting economic resources on the e-girl, sometimes you need to have some kind of realism, and some people call that pessimism or chastity or whatever, but you need to have some reticence and some temperance approaching these attractors, these psychological attractors to the medium of the screen. It's this huge, complicated thing. It's like when an animal, sometimes you see birds will peck. They will peck at a rear view mirror on the side of a car. They'll hop on, they'll grasp on with their little bird feet, and they'll start pecking at the mirror because they think it's really another bird, because they don't have the mental faculties to learn that, hey, that's just a mirror, dude. Or maybe on some level, maybe they know it's a mirror, but their instincts are so powerful they can't resist the pecking. It's like it's like when you hear a groove and you got to start dancing, maybe that's what the bird is doing in that moment. But we have these multiple parts of our brain where we can consciously recognize that what we're doing is bad, but we still go through the motions. We still do it. And so this is a problem. This is a problem with right-wing commentators, where they want to paint a false picture of optimism because to be pessimistic, they know, is going to put them in a worse off financial situation, or even it might not even be financial. There's some people where maybe they don't care about, maybe they're retired, maybe they have all the money they'd ever need. They don't need the simping in economic terms. Maybe they want it in social terms. Maybe they're a narcissist. Maybe they just want to feel important, or whatever it is. Maybe they want to feel like they're a leader. And so they're painting a false picture of optimism about certain ideas, about the trajectory, where things are going, certain possibilities. They're painting that false picture for their own benefit. And a lot of people are getting fooled. And again, it's not so much an intellectual thing, but it's on an emotional level. We want to be part of an identity. We want to be part of a movement. We see problems. We see problematic aspects of the society we're involved with. We want to change it. We want to have agency. We want to be part of a collective with collective agency, because we understand that as individuals, we can't really be effective on a societal level. So we try to collectivize. We try to form a collective identity, a political identity, to get something done rather than be apathetic. So in an emotional sense, you could even say it's healthy to delude yourself. This is sort of the argument that people would make in terms of religion, a Daniel Dennett kind of argument of like, well, even if God isn't real, it's still psychologically healthy for people to believe in him, to pray, to go to church, to do all of that. If you have to believe in a noble lie or something like Plato's myth of the metals, if you have to believe in something that's not technically true or accurate, but it's going to put you in a more harmonious position, it's going to put you in a more active, assertive position, you're going to just live your life in a way that is more caring rather than apathetic, rather than, oh, everything's terrible, it's all going to be terrible, why bother doing anything? That's going to lead to self-harm. That's going to lead to masochism. So maybe deluding yourself, I think the argument is deluding yourself into believing there is some hope or some future state where things are going to be better, and therefore we should invest energy, time, resources into making that happen, to participating in that, to being on the winning team, so to speak, being on the right side of history. That is a healthier emotional state. It's not healthy to be a pessimist. It's not healthy to be a realist. It's not healthy to look at the facts as they are and deal with it, to deal with them. So what this effectively means is your pathos is tied to your logos. Your facts and your logic and your feels and your emotions, they're all tied together. The way that you perceive the world empirically is going to affect your emotions. Now, the mediator here is ideology. The mediator here is how we perceive these things. Is it a good thing or is it a bad thing that the world is going the way it is? So let's just see how my audio is going. No one has said that the audio is bad. It's about 45 minutes. Or let's take a break. Let's jump into this aesthetic. What do you think of Kaufman's thesis that the high fertility of fundamentalists will lead to the end liberal society, imagine you're skeptical. Yes, I am skeptical, because when I look at evangelical opinions, evangelical Christians are moving to the left on every issue. So on gay marriage, young evangelical Christians say it's a good thing versus older evangelical Christians. In terms of other cultural issues, they are moving to the left. So possibly any question you could ask, biblical literacy, science, evolution, pretty much any single question that you could ask that is political in one way that pertains to this question of liberalism, evangelicals are moving to the left, not to the right. They're not even staying put. They're consistently moving to the left. They've been doing this for generations. If we go back before the Jerry Falwells and before the Billy Grahams, they've been doing this for a very long time. You can even go back to the abolitionist movement in some respects. And even before that, America has many different religious revivals that I think people on the right wing or conservatives or traditionalists or whatever have at certain times looked at those and said, aha, and now we shall defeat liberalism. But liberalism sort of comes in through the back door. It's always, these religious revivals always seem to be a Trojan horse, because they say, oh, well, if you go into some of these Protestant churches, they'll say, oh, well, we need rock for Jesus. We need a big green screen for Jesus. We need indie music for Jesus. So they're always modernizing. And when you modernize the music, you modernize the message, as McLuhan would say. The medium is the message. And so when you switch from a traditional hymn written 400, 300, 200 years ago, and you switch over to modern music, you're effectively leading credence to that entire genre. And you're priming people psychologically, because when people hear music, they're not dissecting the literary quality of the lyrics. They're not understanding the political messaging or the metaphysics behind it. They're simply catching a groove. And so if you indoctrinate people to say, oh yeah, Jesus likes prog rock and Jesus likes indie music and he likes, these soft, effeminate men getting up there and playing the guitar and whatever, that Christian rock, Christian music, you're essentially sending a signal to their brain on a deep level that when you hear that type of music in other scenarios, in other instances, that's good, that's okay. You're priming them to accept that, and you're integrating them into the culture. When these types of people, they think they're doing a reverse Trojan horse. They think, oh, well, we're going to slip Jesus into rap music. We're going to slip Jesus in through this new progressive music or whatever it is. We're going to slip Jesus in there. We're going to have a new religious revival. We're going to pull one over on those liberals. We're going to really turn everything topsy-turvy. So yeah, Christians can be cool too, but that's never going to work. It's always going to have the opposite effect. They don't realize that. Now, the alternative, which is we just only listen to classical music, well, that's problematic as well. If you don't have a place in society, that you're totally alienated from society at point, which is, kind of if you want to go live on the ranch, if you want to go live on the farm, if you want to be Amish, that option exists. People can do that. There already exist communities. You don't even have to create a new community. I would question, I would question people. So why is your community better than what the Amish are doing fundamentally? Why don't you go infiltrate the Amish? Why don't you introduce, so you think the Amish are insufficient because they don't read ancient Greek history? So why not just go into the Amish and convert them? Why not just infiltrate the Amish and start teaching them Greek or something? But there are many other communities besides the Amish who are doing some kind of off the grid or alternative grid, I guess is the new term. So I'd say, well, what's so unique here? But people can do that, and people can prove me wrong and disengage with culture by listening to classical music and by alienating themselves even further from society. And they might achieve happiness from that, and that might be a better environment for their kids. And I'm sympathetic to that. But I do question, if we look at the grand scheme of global shifts in culture, you look in South Africa, there's a town called Orania, which kind of bucks the trend of the general South African cultural discourse. I don't think that's an effective defense against what's going on in a big way, in a central way. I think the only way you affect change is from the center. You don't do it from the periphery. I don't think the periphery does it. I don't think the idea of there's this image we have in our culture of the prophet coming out of the desert. It's a very old image. You see it in a lot of different movies and novels. The prophet coming out of the desert, the idea of coming out of the periphery and bringing a message back to the people. You know, asceticism, if you have a centralized structure, if you have a tradition, it can be powerful. But if it's never integrated back into the center, then it's not really effective in the long term. If everyone raids Area 51 at once, yeah, and then we all get cucked by the federal government. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the Area 51 raid is just this example of how people will. I mean, everyone knew it was a joke. It's very ironic. We're all going to get hyped up about this. It's like they could have done it. They could have done something. They could have done more than what they did, and they didn't. And everyone was like, "Oh, I was just joking, guys. You know, please don't mess with me." I mean, people are just so scared. They are more cowed than ever before. And I was just looking at this tweet where the point being made was something like, if you think America's uncivil now, just think back to the early stages of our republic when you had members of Congress and the Senate and the presidential cabinet who were dueling each other and killing each other. I mean, that was just way more uncivil. I mean, at least we're not killing each other, right? At least Hillary and Trump, they're not dueling, right? And the point there was to say that we're uncivil. But I take away the opposite point. I take away the point that we're no longer willing to duel over matters of honor. And if we don't have honor, then we don't have civility. So actually, the fact that people are not willing to duel over matters of honor shows that we are in the least civil part of our history ever. That in the past, people really were willing to duel and duke it out and fight over matters of honor. And so the foundation of civilization and agency is a sense of honor. We've lost that. We don't have that. So if you call me a liar, I just say, "Oh, well, that's your opinion, man," or, "Oh, well, maybe you're being ironic." You know, there's nothing strong there. There's no pushback. It's just kind of, well, whatever, you know. Oh, the government says we shouldn't invade Area 51. Oh, it was just all a joke. So you can't do anything these days. Merry Christmas, sir. Merry Christmas to you. Who is your animating foe? Obelisk Respecter. Yeah, I would say Obelisk Respecter is probably my animating foe. I don't do we have, I think we talk about animating foes or animating ideas. I mean, that's generally what I do. I take an idea and I criticize it kind of as a foil. And that's typically how we do things. Great big beautiful fence. Gonna tell kids this was Eckhart Tolle. Yeah, true. I can only hope. There is a swelling vengeance in the tone of this stream. I don't know what that means. I'm intrigued. Build a wall with Mexico. Okay. Build a wall around Mexico or something. What motivates this willingness to be motivated by the opposition to the foe? These people seem to be enthusiastically drink the Kool-Aid. Yeah, it's a tribal psychological thing. It has to do with our evolutionary history, where you sort of the tribe needs to identify a foe. Once you identify a foe, then you can fight. If you don't know who the foe is, no one's really inspired to fight. I don't know, it seems pretty self-evident to me. But I have an inspired stream. True. Is it fear? Years of education. Fearless armies of the uneducated. Yeah, if only that were true. But the thing is, even if you go and live on a farm off the grid, or you create your own grid, alternative grid, the problem is the air and the water and the land itself globally is polluted with xenoestrogens, and there's no way to escape that. There's absolutely no way to escape that. And yeah, so I mean, no matter where you go on this planet Earth, your kids are going to be less assertive and masculine and have less agency than their forebears. That's pretty much a guarantee. And there's no way around that. Maybe the polling information is not reliable. I think it is reliable. Draws a lot of opinions about the world from political polling data. Needs to rely more on his gut. Yeah, I'm gonna disagree there, because my gut already is affirming what I'm saying, and really the polling data is backing that up. So it's gut versus gut, my gut versus your gut. I mean, can you eat an onion, dude? Do you have as strong a gut as me? I don't know that you do. So I don't know who's going to win that gut war, which would tell him that everything is going good. We're all about to wake up. Oh, Randy, you're such a good sarcastic jokester, Randy. Hope you're getting swole over there. Someone has switched Kenneth's Christmas pudding for black-billed pudding. Yeah, possibly. I was going to talk about the war on Christmas, but I don't know. Is Christmas going away? I mean, is it politically correct to say I hate Christmas and I want to destroy Christmas? Is that is that politically correct? Can I say that? Because it's kind of true. I don't know. You know, we're trying to keep things mainstream here, but I kind of hate Christmas, and if I was in charge, I would probably declare war on Christmas. 27% of Dems, yeah, we can't read that, but good joke. Why would his gut be lying to him like that? Gut's not lying. Guts are oracles. Gut check. How everyone rub your tummy and pat your head. How's the gut feeling? How's that gut feeling? I'm gonna reframe everything in my life so I'm always winning. I'm getting Italian. Oh man, this is good. Getting Italian food tonight. Pretty pumped. Winning. Hashtag winning. Hashtag before Charlie Kirk, we had Charlie Sheen. Hashtag winning. Are there no fragilities in this international monetary system? No. The answer is no. There are no fragilities. And we have to figure it out. We have to figure out how we're going to orient ourselves going forward. Are we going to keep pounding ourselves? Like, are we going to keep smacking our forehead against the concrete? Or are we going to do something different? I don't know what that different thing is. But I strongly recommend people have an inner, have a sense of enslavement. I had a video called Religion is Slavery. People need a sense of enslavement in some way. People need a sense in which it's like, okay, I'm going to beat myself into the dirt, not emotionally, not like hating yourself, but you have to like have a very strong sense of discipline concerning building up your skills and doing things which are difficult and hard. Some people that's going to be a physical thing. Some people that's going to be a social thing. Some people it's going to be having to do with education. Some people it's going to be something else. But most people it's going to be a mixture of everything, and identifying where you're good, taking you sort of have a competitive advantage in one area of your life. You know, maybe you're good at math. Maybe you're good at, verbal IQ. Maybe you're good with your hands. Maybe you're good with people. Maybe you're good physically, but you have some kind of competitive advantage. You have to look into that and see, well, where can I take this? How far can I take this? What do I love to do? What's my passion? You know, and I've said before, you kind of have to question that on some level. You have to then say, okay, well, this is what I like to do. But is this going to end up in a good place? Is this going to put me in a good place if I pursue my passion? You have to ask yourself that. And you have to kind of, you have to take those questions. You have to work through them practically. You can't just daydream about things you might like to do in the future. You have to actually test those ideas, because you don't know who you are until you're tested, until you sort of put the pedal to the metal and you really force yourself into the situation that is difficult and challenging. You're really never going to know who you are and what you're capable of. So you kind of have to throw yourself into things, and it's a risky business. But what's the worst that can happen? You die. Well, you're going to die anyway. So, you know, not much use being afraid of stuff. So don't be afraid of things. Just try to figure out what you're good at, and then figure out if what you're good at is meaningful. Like if you're really good at, I don't know, prostituting yourself, well, that might work out for you economically while you're young, but when you start getting older, it's going to be harder and harder. So maybe that's your skill set. Maybe you're just the best prostitute in the world, but you kind of have to really ask yourself, okay, yeah, I'm really good. This is my passion. I have a passion for sex work, but is that really going to bear itself out in the end? Maybe even though you're really good at that, maybe you should be more long-term minded in that respect. So that's a pretty extreme scenario to illustrate a point. Are we reducing history to battles in which lines drawn are arbitrary, and every fight is only over power for power's sake? Sounds like a cry for meaning. Yeah, possibly. The light dark symbolism in the Bible is related to meaning chaos. E-girls and wars are chaos. Kenneth Blabbering is claiming he is chaos just the same. Am I claiming that I'm chaos? I don't think I did that. What about whoa, this guy's not healthy? On a scale from dead to healthy, he's pretty healthy. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of an absurd statement, but whatever. Got a new light for Christmas. Looking good. The gray has fought a Balrog. Come back as the white. Who is this? Fourth density. I'll take that as a compliment. Dionysian bear. Yeah, probably not. Christian rock is a gateway drug. Yeah, no, really. Christian rock will melt your brain and make you stupid. It is worse. I would prefer people listen to satanic death metal. At least then you're engaged. It's like it's an internally consistent. I can respect its coherence, its internal coherence. It's like, yeah, death metal. Whereas Christian rock, you're basically going to the same place. You're just doing it a little smoother. Things moving to the right is a total delusion. People need to stop looking at reality through internet memes and look at the way people choose to live. Liberalism is totalizing. True. The right is about to get booted off the internet. True. Thoughts on IQ? Not really important. I mean, some of these questions, we have to contextualize them. Do I have the ability to do anything about them? And if I don't, is talking about them just going to get me in trouble? And therefore, should I even bother? What is the practical application of me answering some of these questions? Is it going to move things in a good direction? Are we going to get anywhere with that? Can't believe I haven't asked. That's a mysterious answer. Keep that a mystery. Keep that in the back pocket, the secret formula. Being willing to duel for honor could arguably be compared with fighting a political cause that looks hopeless. Okay, click accept. Okay, that's a good argument. Fighting a political cause that looks hopeless. But if you're going to do that, be realistic about it. Don't start telling me, oh, well, Gen Z is so based and we're going to win and look at all this winning. We got Trump elected, we got Brexit, and this shows that we're winning, when all of that is the opposite of the case. So I'm fine with people fighting hopeless battles. I don't have a problem with that. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's what we should do. But don't tell me that you're not fighting. Like if you're fighting a hopeless battle, be honest about it. Say that, yeah, I'm fighting a hopeless battle. I'm never going to win this battle. Okay, well, I can respect. You understand what you're doing, and you're so fervent, and you're such a fanatical moralist that you're going to fight this moral battle, even though you know you're going to lose. That's cool. That's awesome. But when you start saying, oh, guys, donate to my thing and simp for me and pay attention and give me e-bucks and attention because, we're winning and everything is going good. Well, that's a problem, isn't it? That's a problem. It is a democratic problem because when you're dependent upon a mass audience, you have to feed them cotton candy and fluff. You have to feed them optimism porn. And there's no way around that in an economy which just rewards mass audiences. So there's an incentive problem there that's going to lead to falsehood over the truth. And that's what I'm criticizing. I like the general warm atmosphere, meeting your family. What's better than a cozy dinner and a warm home? Yeah, so I don't have a problem with families. I don't have a problem with what Christmas used to be. I have a problem with what Christmas has become and what it's becoming. So in a sense, I view Christmas as like I don't know what it is. It's like Darth Vader or something. It's like Anakin Skywalker was a good guy. He was like a nice kid from Tatooine, but then he became Darth Vader, and now we have to fight him. So I believe in banning Christmas music, which was produced after 1920. I'm in favor of that. I'm in favor of banning plastic Christmas lights. I'm in favor of banning Christmas shopping. I think that the state should impose a 50% tax or some kind of egregious tax on all retail stores from the day after Thanksgiving until New Year's. I think they should impose a heavy tax on retail goods to prevent people from shopping. That is the war on Christmas that I envision. I want to drive people back into the cozy home. So Christmas of Charles Dickens, I like that. But the Christmas of the plastic lights and the plastic snowmen and the shopping spree and the Black Friday and what else do we have going on? The post 1920s Christmas music, the boomer Christmas music made by people who weren't even Christian and just talks about Rudolph and snowmen and all that stuff. I declare war on that culturally, in a cultural sense. I think the problem of Christmas is more the consumer orgy, the culture of advertisement, the commercial symbology that's been constructed. Christmas is a psyop, not the family stuff. Although families use gift-giving rituals as means of emotionally blackmailing each other. Yeah, I would say the only gifts that should be given during Christmas at this point, we need a total shutdown on all Christmas activities until we can figure what the hell is going on here. I don't know what the hell is going on. So we're going to need the total and complete shutdown on all Christmas activities until we can just figure out what is going on here. So yeah, gift giving can be problematic. I think people should spend time with each other. I think handmade gifts, cooking. I think people should just make cookies and eat delicious Christmas cookies and go to church and have the mass and things like that. So that's the kind of Christmas that I would support. All the rest of it just seems to be trashy and kitschy and headed in a really bad direction. I listen exclusively to Gnostic Disco. It's pretty cool. The Christian rock to death metal pipeline in many such cases. Yeah, you're not going to end up there, but Christian rock just makes people. It's such a weak, so sad. It's not good stuff. Swiss cheese, roasted mushrooms, caramelized onion. Show us your feet. You're gonna have to pay some money for that. Not going to do that for free. Almost just pulled my credit card out. What's your solution? What is my solution? My solution is we have to be realistic. If we are lying to ourselves to make ourselves feel better, it's not going to work out in the long run. So that's the first thing. We have to be realistic. We have to tell the truth. We have to understand what's going on. We have to fight battles strategically. We can't just say, oh, well, I'm just going to say things for the sake of being offensive. It's not going to work out in the long term. When you actually look at internet history or history in general, but specifically the last 10, 20 years of internet history, e-celebs come and go, movements come and go, politics come and go. This stuff is ephemeral. It's temporal. You have to understand what you really want in life, how you're going to achieve that. Is it through a zany, fashionable political movement, or is it going to be something a little bit deeper, a little bit something more, I don't know, just basic. Just people understanding what their problems are and what they're willing to do. I think everyone should. I encourage people going off the reservation, literally, geographically. Get out of the city, go into the wild, go into the wilderness, go somewhere where nobody lives, and just hang out and just live there and just do something crazy like this. Travel across the world, get out of your element, do something kind of extreme. Live off the land or whatever, do that, and then ask yourself, do you want to do that for the rest of your life? Some people are going to say, yeah, this is the healthiest way. I'm in tune with nature. I don't care about what's going on politically. I don't care about the outside world. I just want to live the natural life, the psychologically healthy life. I want to raise children in the woods, and we can be children of nature. I mean, this was in some part, the hippie movement had an aspect of this. And there's still a hippie movement around. It's kind of boomerish and older, and it's white women with dreadlocks and things like that. But there still is something of this that exists, and you can go interact with that. And I encourage that kind of thing. Otherwise, we'll read this, Zip folks. I have no solution. I am so angry right now. We are gonna come back here like 1,000,000 times. Yeah, exactly. That's just every waking moment of my life. I'm just hearing that voice in my mind. But to sort of continue, I think people really should get out there and reject everything. Stop what you're doing, drop everything, and go out there and live on the periphery and live as your ancestors and be a hunter gatherer, be a farmer, go through, like trace the steps of your ancestors through time and space and technology and live the way that they did. And then ask yourself, is this the way you want to live the way your rest of your life? If the answer is yes, boom, I just solved it. That's the solution. But if the answer is no, then that's a new starting point, right? If the answer is no, how are we going to interact with society in the future and where things are going? What are we going to do with this? And there are so many false things we can say are wrong and false. We can say that taking up arms or advocating for violence against the system, which is the best negotiator of violence in the history of violence, that has the best tools and technologies with which to administer, deflect, diffuse, and apply violence. That's obviously not a good idea. Something before we even talk about morality, of course, the morals, that's very important. But on a practical level, that is, of course, just terrible. It is very stupid. It's terrible. So I would say these are kind of preconditions. These are the steps I would advocate people walk through psychologically. That's a big no-no. And then we can start getting into the other things. But when I see people tolerating that kind of attitude, that kind of talk, that kind of, it is pornographic, because none of these people follow through. And it's just a way to enervate your soul. It's just a way talking about violence makes you feel big and tough and powerful. Nobody follows through. And it's very sad. So these are kind of probably the two biggest fundamental, I think, is working toward a solution. Has to be a dialogue which is sort of predicated on these things, that people really need to get out of their comfort zone and do things that are, maybe in a sense life-threatening, things that are, I don't know if I can legally, TOS, YouTube TOS, is that allowed? Maybe. I wasn't really saying that. That's all ironic. But I think people should really put them, maybe when I say life-threatening, I'm not talking about physical life-threatening. I'm talking about mental. Threaten your mental life, threaten your emotional life, threaten your psychological life, shake things up a bit. I would say that's step number one. That's really important. And then step number two, I would say, understand that all these warrior porn fantasies about, collapse of the system, fighting the system, civil war against the system, all of that stuff is so wrong in a number of levels, and we can go through the arguments. That'd be step number two. And then once we reach that point, we can start having a dialogue and we can start working out a solution. I think for me, I'm much less of a telos. I'm much less of a, here is the model of reality. Here is the political strategy that's going to get us to the stars. Here's the method by which, here's the 12 steps. Here's, step 1, 2, 3 of how we're going to win. I don't have that. I don't think anyone has that. I don't think that exists. I don't think it should exist. I think what I am offering and what I would put forth is a process of self-evaluation, self-knowledge, and then coming together, communal evaluation, communal discussion, communal knowledge, where we come together and we try to figure this out together, because I don't think it is going to happen individually. Maybe some people are going to be those there's stylite or whatever, people who go live on their own. And maybe that there's a certain amount of people who are going to do that. And if that's you, then by all means. But I think other people realize that we got to work together. We got to talk with each other. And I just encourage people, we have to come to a point in discourse where we can be public about these things. If you are talking and thinking about things on anonymous platforms, which you could never say to the people around you, then we have a serious problem, because you're not going to get anywhere with that. If what you're saying and the way that you're saying it is so offensive and so taboo and so backwards and so parochial and so out of touch, then you either need to go live in the woods and keep saying your offensive stuff, but have a parallel society. You need to construct a parallel society. Or if you're not going to do that, you need to figure out a new way of talking about things and a new way of speaking about things. That's what I push for. Stop sending Christmas cards 8 years ago after almost suiciding due to the phrase that was written in one. At one point, only very Very few stupid people still send them to me. Well, I don't know exactly what that means, click accept, but Christmas cards, yeah. The whole card industry is, there's a problem there. There is a big problem with the card industry. But again, it's levels. It's like, to me, the Christmas card is the least offensive part of it. Of course, we know the Christmas card leads to the Christmas music, leads to the plastic lights, the plastic snowmen, leads to, here's $100 for Christmas and whatever. We know where all of that leads. But in this world of apathy, in this world where people don't care about each other, in this world where increasingly young men are saying they don't have close friends. Okay, that's some data for you. Young men increasingly saying, I don't have close friends. I don't have someone I can trust. I don't have someone I can talk to. I don't have someone I can go up to and say, here's how I feel. Here's how I've been feeling. Here's what's going on in my life. Here are my secrets. Young men don't feel like that anymore. So in a world like that, receiving a Christmas card, to me personally, is not the worst thing in the world. Sure, I care about you. I spent the time to go buy the Christmas card, write out, send it to you. But then you have those people who do that to everyone, right? They got a list of like 50 or more people where they just buy en masse. They're like, every year I buy like 100 Christmas cards and I, sign it and I send it out, and it's my big day. It's December 20th or whatever, or however long before Christmas. Or my big day, December 1st, I write up I take an hour and I write up. It's like, I do my knitting and I check my Farmville or whatever sort of things people do. It's like a little craft project. I put my Christmas cards together and I send them out. Yeah, I mean, we see the point at which that can also be superficial. So would we ban Christmas cards? I mean, we might have to ban them. We might just have to ban Christmas cards unless it is a handmade letter. Here's what I'll say. Here's what I say. You can send Christmas cards, but no images. No images and no printed text. You can send people a card, but it has to be a blank white card. And the only thing which can be on that card, except for blank white, is pictures that you draw yourself and words that you write yourself. So I think that is the only Christmas cards that would be acceptable under my totalitarian regime. The military needs more money to finance the war on Christmas. Did you know it's the longest war in U.S. history? The military Yuletide complex has an iron grip on the U.S. government. Those filthy elves. They turn spending shopping into a kind of fiscal vacation, cut loose and let the dollars fly. It's like binge drinking. Very true. Yeah, Peter Eklund. What? I thought being racist online would bring us to complete victory. It turns out there's problems with that argument. Binge drinking for women. Yeah, just like romance novels. You have no... Oh, we already read that one. Varg uses Twitter. He's a Viking. Yeah, well, okay. Varg will pass his Twitter account down to his firstborn son like an ancestral sword. Violence is a non-starter. Most people only fantasize. In heated emotional states, they would feel horrible if they did something IRL. Yeah, look at people like James Fields was found crying. I think a lot of these people, you can find these young Gen Z, young people who get into violence, political or incel or whatever it is. They get into this violence, and then they're found by the police like crying. The interviews, the detective goes in and is like, hey, man, what'd you do? And they're like, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm such a bad person. It's really sad. Yeah, on a number of levels. Intellectual discourse supposedly leading to a solution is pornographic. Take the great man pill. There are no solutions unless the great man emerges, which is outside of our control. Well, that is kind of like the Christian theory of Christ coming back. We just kind of wait till Christ comes back, and we just sort of like, we're praying, we're living our Christian lives, and we are doing the best that we can with what we have, and we're just waiting for Jesus. We can't do anything until Jesus comes back. So I'm not saying that intellectual discourse is going to lead to a solution, by the way. I'm saying that intellectual discourse is the solution itself. It is the solution itself. A little comment here. Fields didn't do it on purpose. Yeah, I mean, that's probably true. That is probably true. He probably didn't. On some level, it was probably not premeditated the day before. So that's a whole argument. I don't really want to rehash that argument, but it just shows you. I mean, like, look, let's consider the situation in which you are surrounded by people with baseball bats hitting your car. In that moment, what do? Are you like a scared woman and you like put the pedal to the metal and then you start crying afterwards? Is that what you do? Or you're like, if I'm going down, I'm going to take some of you with me? Still legitimate self-defense, by the way. I mean, or even if it is an accident, even if you accidentally hit the pedal. I mean, I guess people, I guess empathy and all these things. But what I'm saying is that there's supposed to be this hardcore vanguard right-wing movement of tough men saying tough things on the internet. And then one of them gets in an accident. And then he's like this blubbering, crying, it's like, where is I don't know. Are we crying? Is that what it is? Because I'm not saying you shouldn't cry. Maybe you should cry. Maybe we should all just have a good cry every month or every week. Maybe we should cry once a day. I don't know. Maybe we should all just start crying more. But what I'm trying to say is that if you want to advocate for violence and you think you're a violent group, then I'm kind of pointing out the crying there. But apparently, I didn't know this. Apparently, he was already diagnosed with schizophrenia. I didn't know that. If that's true, that's new information to me. And I'd like to see evidence for it because I haven't seen any evidence for that. That would seem to be a great case for the defense. So they could say, hey, my boy feels he has schizophrenia. Probably shouldn't be criminally prosecuted. Should probably get some mental help here. So sad if true. So yeah, that's all the comments. Take a look at our count here. We get 20 viewers, 8 thumbs up. Not the best stream we've had. Not the best one. That's okay. We did about 1 hour, 30 minutes. I think I will leave it there, and we'll think of some new. We'll think of some new good things to think and say in the future. How about that? All right. So thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.